I've drawn the short straw having to interview you, Chris. 2 weeks after a preliminary final loss, what's it like from a coaching perspective in terms of reflecting on the whole year and the disappointment that one game provides? But you're an optimistic person. How's the last few weeks been?
It's been hard, Pat. Yeah, I would like to, and I tell myself I'm an optimist, and I think long term I am, but the short term is really difficult. And it's almost become a cliche now that you need to take that emotional risk, to achieve great things. And sort of that rolls off the tongue when things go well, but it's really acute when things don't quite work out. And I'm not a huge believer that, or at least from my perspective, I've never really felt like I've needed that disappointment to drive me forward. And in a way, our players each to their own to an extent, but I hope they don't need it either. I hope that we can approach sort of next season almost in isolation. Yes, build on some of the things that we learnt and reflect on maybe some of the things we didn't quite get right, but move forward with a really optimistic mindset and feel good about what's possible, because it's not always that you start a season in such an equalised competition feeling really good about your prospects, but we are, I think, again in the privileged position where we can attack an off-season and a pre-season thinking that if we get most things right, that will be a really good chance. That makes me feel a little bit better.
We don't talk about this stuff a huge amount, or really at all during the season, but are you cognisant of, as we try to pick the best team every week to play and to win, but still bring in young players and give them opportunities because you're not quite sure what they're going to deliver because they haven't played yet? Like, what's the balance with selection on a week-to-week basis? Because we've seen some great development from some of our younger players. Shawnee Mannor's not a young player, but he's come in and made a real difference to our side, and it's littered with others as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think it depends on your circumstances, and it just happens that, in our time together, certainly, and the 14 years I've been at the Cats, it feels like we've been in that position the whole time, where we have some experienced players who are still really high-level performers, but we knew that we had to encourage some younger players into our system, and ultimately what we're hoping for is that we can bring some young guys in and they can perform at a level at least as good as some of our experienced players, and that's a big ask because it takes time to sort of develop in this competition, and when you think about some of the things that have given us a chance to compete towards the end of the year on multiple occasions, I mean, there are lots of things, but you sort of go to our recruiting a little bit, and I think maybe our development and our recruiting and our list management team don't get enough credit. Like when you think about, I don't take any credit whatsoever for Lawson Humphreys. Just a remarkable job from our recruiting team to pluck Lawson, and then our development guys to help him come along so quickly. So yes, we're going to have to continue to keep doing that because we have no intention of putting all our eggs in one basket and risking the fact that we might not be in a position to sit here and say we're going to have a crack at being towards the top of the ladder next year. So it is a balance.
Do you think you're optimistic by nature? Do you think that helps with that because it's what they might be able to bring rather than the fear of, we haven't seen this enough from VFL level, we can't pick him yet?
Well, yeah, I think if you waited until you were completely sure, then you'd never do it. It does take that. There's a little bit of the science, but I think it's more an art. And I'm not speaking for myself here so much. It's more. I mean, our development guys, probably Nigel Lappin the most, but he was banging down our coaching group. There are 4 of us that sort of look after the AFL team, saying, you just got to play this guy. And such is the faith that I have in his opinion. It's like, well, if he feels so strongly about it, we probably should do it. And now he's saying, I told you so, you were 10 weeks too late. But I think that it's one of the most exciting parts, and one of the things that I think helps keep like you and I younger than we otherwise would be, that you just so if you can stay open to the possibilities of what that youthful exuberance will bring. But again, you can go too far sort of that way and really compromise your overall team. And I'm still adamant it's difficult to do it overnight. It takes a long period of meticulous planning, especially at the list management level. But young players in our system, I'm going to pump you up a little bit here, have a better chance to flourish when they're playing next to some experienced, sort of hardened AFL players. And I think everyone's searching for that balance, but it's difficult to always get there. And look, I think we're relatively close. I think Craig mentioned, we had a lot of young players that didn't play in a premiership 2 years ago who were, core parts of our senior team. Was it 9?
Yeah.
And Sean Manor coming in, like it's I guess you could call it a calculated risk, but I reckon he was 2 weeks into our program where the risk was completely mitigated. You could just tell that he was ready to play AFL footy.
With those recruiters that every club has them, are you sort of chatting throughout the week around, like Nigel is obviously head of development, so he handles that part of the building, but are you chatting with the recruiters with almost historically, this is what they've been good at, so trust that will come to fruition once they start playing VFL into AFL footy? Like, are you having those conversations with the recruiters on, we'll pick these guys, back it in coaches, that they're going to get there?
To an extent. I mean, traditionally the recruiters say, when they play well, we picked a good one, and when they don't play well, what have you done to them as a coaching group? And I think that's sort of the same across all footy clubs and has been for a long period of time. But, I mean, hand on heart, I have such faith in Stephen Wells and his team and the work Andrew Mackey's done and Shane O'Brien. We've known each other for a long time, and I think successful clubs do preach stability and cohesion for a reason. You just, when you know these people, and there's no point being stable, if the people are no good. The reason you stay stable is because you have such a high regard for those people, and I trust them implicitly. So when it comes to the recruiting, I have an opinion, but I've got a healthy respect for the work that they do that overrides my opinion. If Stephen tells me that he's done the work on a player and he should play in this position and it's time to give him a chance, I tend to defer to that opinion.
Part of that stability is like quite clearly the physical performance aspect, and Scott Murphy, he was certainly around, after you, but near on 10 years, a huge impact within our footy department, and what is sometimes an ego-filled environment, he has none. He's been pretty special.
Yeah, he's been amazing for us, and I'm not sure many people in the room would know Scott Murphy. He's a lower profile guy in that role. He has never sought credit for the great work that he's done, great at delegating and deferring to others. And to have 10 years in that role with a period of really consistent results on field is a credit to him. Now he is, and we probably are, he's not a victim, he's got a great opportunity, but he was headhunted by an operation that has no soft cap, and that's in a way you can bemoan that situation. But again, I tend to take the optimistic point of view that it reflects really well on our club that those people are highly sought after, and it's rare for someone to be in that position for so long, but it's also just as rare for them to be leaving on such good terms. He's been amazing for us, and it's hard sometimes for everyone to love those guys because they push you hard, and
mate, you run 15 minutes straight, skin folds, all manner of testing.
And now I say it out loud, maybe didn't go hard enough,
but we've had some change. I caught up with you last week, and I know it's the part of the job that you despise the most when you have players exit the system and the club. But there's some particulars that I want to sort of cover off on. I want to take you back to 2022, the qualifying final. As a coach, you'd spoken in the lead up to it around, we're going to have a game where things don't go our way, and we'd won 15 or 16 straight, I think, at that stage, and had been firing on all cylinders. And this was the game that wasn't, going all that great. And Gary Rowan plays one of the great finals.
Yeah, and not only one of the great finals.
Like, are you thinking in the box, like, we need something here, and then he soars across centre half forward?
Yeah, I mean, if you're even a casual observer of footy, I think we all admire those who can stand up when the moment requires it. And we knew for us to be a really good team that we couldn't always depend on you or Joel or Hawk. And especially those guys that play in the forward half, it's incredibly difficult for them to be consistent players. It's just, especially in such a stats-mad world that we live in now, but being a forward who sees the footy less than a lot of other players on the ground can be a bit of a difficult existence. So when you get your moments, you've got to take them. And that final week one against Collingwood in 2022, I mean, I can't remember being more proud of a player than I was of Gary in that moment, and always will be.
Few players have drills named after them. Brandon Parfitt is one, and will be finishing up obviously at the end of the season. Once again, a premiership player. A few words on Parf.
Well, I should focus on his footy, but the first thing I think about, well, the first thing I do when I think about Parf is smile. He's just such a good person to have around the footy club. Yeah, I'll be a little bit more sort of introspective and open than I normally am. I've found it really difficult with Brandon because I do really feel for him, and I really, I know, and we live in a competitive environment, and we think about Geelong first, second, and third. But I'd love nothing more than for Parf to go and have a really good career somewhere else, because he deserves it. He's a hard worker. He's a really good young man. And just things haven't kind of worked out, and that's kind of the lot of an AFL footballer in most cases. There's only the rare ones that get to dictate their terms, but we're all the better for having Parf around, that's for sure.
Will be a better place for having him leaving in Zach Toohey. Can you take us inside team meetings, because Chris obviously stands in front of everyone like he is now, and you look up at 50 odd seats. Can you take us inside the messaging that you're giving, and then there's a few players that sit up the back, and the Moroccan, what is it, Reg? The Moroccan sunset, I think it is, or something similar. The moustache that's giggling in one of the seats generally, it tends to take your eye off the game at times.
Oh yeah, he's the worst. Yeah, Nigel Lappin and I can both attest that he's hanging on every word in every meeting, not because he's got any interest at all in the tactical analysis that we're taking them through. He's just looking for one little slip up or one word that no one but him understands, so he can get a laugh. And I mean, I think that we should get Reg Geelong to every Carji Greeves medal for at least the next 10 or 20 years, just for the entertainment value. I've said publicly that I'm not exactly sure what's on the cards for him, but like if Zach Toohey doesn't end up in the media, then no player in the history of the game should go into the media. He was just born for it, and it'd be nice to have him taking the piss out of someone else other than me publicly. But can I just say seriously too, like I've heard a lot from Reg. I've heard a lot from Reg over the last, I don't know, month or so, when it became clear that he was going to retire, and he inevitably would revert back to how grateful he was that the Geelong Footy Club gave him an opportunity. So this is my chance in 15 seconds to say, mate, we're the ones that are grateful to have had him. And I think because he is such a character, and because he was so good for the group, so giving. I mean, I don't know if Reg remembers, but I mean, we won a prelim final 2020 up at the Gabba in the Hub, and I'm not sure if he remembers it this way, but we kind of looked at each other and it was kind of, I think Reg was like, this is what I came here for, and you know, we'd been through a couple of years where we, you know, sort of got close and weren't to know that it was going to be devastating sort of 7 days later, but it was, it was one of those moments where there's that, you recognise that there's an unspoken sort of bond that can kind of never be broken. And I don't think we even said anything, and we probably don't need to say anything after the fact, but because of those moments, we talk about him as a human, which is absolutely valid. But don't forget what a good player he was.
Yeah.
Like he was a star. In his position in particular, the flexibility, it was just such a great move for us to bring him into our footy club. And he will, I'm sure, tonight get the chance to say thank you for the opportunity you gave me, but he changed us as well. So, yeah, eternally grateful to the great Reg.
You talk about culture setters, he's certainly one of those. So well done, Reggie. Tom Hawkins, by all accounts, arrives on the big stage in terms of becoming an A grader in the 2011 grand final. That is your first season, and from then on he becomes the dominant big man in the game, being hugely influential for both of us. But having someone like Big Hawk at your disposal, it's a pretty handy thing as a coach.
I mean, for, what was it, 14 years or so, you just didn't need to think about sort of how we were going to play, at least when it came to sort of moving the ball into our forward half. And maybe we were a bit slow on the uptake at times, but it wouldn't have been the worst plan if all we said was, let's just get it to Hawk, sort of one out as much as we can and let the big guy do the rest. When I first met Hawk about the end of 2010, I didn't realise as an outsider just the pressure that was on such a obviously talented sort of young man, but still very, very young as a player, full stop, but young for a key forward in particular. And I thought that sort of our job as a footy club was to help him understand just how good he already was, and how good he could be. And you know, it was a difficult time. It's always difficult. I think people underrate how difficult, even when you have success, that last month of the season is. You know, selection's brutal. You're sort of thinking through, you know, what's best for the individual, but more importantly, what's best for the team. And I've, even as a really young coach, I'd never been so sure in something as I was that late in that season that Hawk was our man. And again, it's not a reflection necessarily on the coaches, it's a reflection on him. But that game was there to be won in 2011. It was really up for grabs, and he was the one that took it by the scruff of the neck and never looked back. And sort of the rule number one of being a coach is that you should avoid as much as possible to play favourites, or at least give the perception that, you know, you love. But when they're retired, all that goes out the window. You can talk about how much you love them, and like, you know, we've just, you know, Joel's, it's pretty recent in our memory, and with great respect to Joel, and probably you as well a little bit. Hawks, you know, I think he's got to be close. He's definitely on the podium of my favourite players of all time, not just at our club, in history.
Yeah.
Like and so,
do you think how good a person he is, like, adds to that as well? Like, he's such a humble, big, cuddly bear.
Cuddly bear, yeah,
like,
and
he just is, with beautiful teeth.
I think hopefully if we're doing a really good job, like if you think in 10 years' time we've nailed the next decade, I think what you'd hope is that players come into our footy club and people come into our footy club and they learn things from that experience and go out thinking, I was better for that. And the common thread for me with those sort of guys, like Cameron Ling was kind of the start of it for me. I came in as a really young coach and was like, gee, he's just a really nice young man. And then he goes out to training and rips people's heads off. Yeah. And Hawk was that, he's just, you know, if, like my 11-year-old loves him, like everyone loves him off the field, but they don't have to play on him. Yeah. And now I sort of think that's what we want to be. You sort of want to be the unassuming, sort of thoughtful, cuddly man that Hawk is. But I think, as Craig might have mentioned it before, like, part of what we're aiming for is to be able to separate that person from the one that takes the field. And I don't know too many players that did it better than Tom. You know, the final siren would go win, lose or draw, and he was back to that sort of beautiful human that we all know.
Do you have a last one on Tom? Do you have a favourite like game day memory? Is there a moment, or like mine? Everyone talks about Zach Tui's goal after the siren, which he's happy to relive over and over. But in the second half of that game, I think Tom kicked 7 or 8 and single-handedly dragged us over the line. Unfortunately, he's forgotten because of Reg's wonderful kick post. But it was Hawk's game that brought us back, and for me, it was like he was the beacon. He was the heartbeat of the club that game, and it was just all roads led to him. Like, is there a memory for you as a coach where it's like, wow, I don't even need to speak today. It's just that guy's on.
I'm gonna try to explain this one, but it's going to be difficult to follow because I'm not going to mention the team that we were playing. I don't think that's fair, and I'm not going to mention the player that he was playing on. Maybe some of the guys that were there in the hub will remember this, but it almost became a verb, this sort of situation where we were trying to set up a play where we'd kick the ball to Hawk in a certain position, and you would insert opposition fullback's name here. He would
2x.
Yeah.
Yep.
And like that was, I think that was kind of the, like, he's such a, I reckon from the first moment I met him, as I said, like I had such high regard for the player that he could be, but it took years to actually get through him. Hawk, just tell us what you want. Like, we will build this team around you, but he was just so sort of humble. But I reckon it was that point, so it must have been 2020 up in the hub, where he was kind of like, maybe you could just get it into me a little quicker and a little deeper, and I'll do the rest. So again, a little cryptic because I'm so conscious of not sounding like a smart aleck when it comes to opposition teams. But there was one game that was like, if he's in that position, he is unstoppable.
A word on the future before we wrap up. We give it a crack every year, which often means you're going to be let down more often than not. Optimistic looking to the future?
Yeah, cautiously. And you always need to be cautiously optimistic, otherwise you just end up complacent. And I think we are at a little bit in a position as a footy club where we've just got to be a little bit careful that we don't assume that we do things better than everyone else. I think what we've worked really hard to do is be really clear on why we do what we do. And it's not even a reflection, it's not even a comparison on any other clubs. We've just got a confidence that if we're clear on why we do the things we do, that ultimately that will give us a chance to succeed. Not guarantee it. And that's, once you start getting to that point, that's when you fall really hard. So we've got to be aware of the challenges in front of us, how hard the comp is. We live in a completely regulated environment where if you're good for a period of time, it will incrementally get harder for you to stay up there. Yep. So we need to think laterally about how we improve. And I think Craig also mentioned it before, we need to be open to risk. And I think the one thing we can guarantee our people is that we will never take any risk that has a potential to completely blow up our football club. Like that is our responsibility. But if we are going to succeed, we need to be at the margin a little bit with our strategy. So that's amazingly exciting. Like it's just, but it's daunting as well, because when you take risks, you've got to be open to the fact that it might not work, and we might have to wear that. But I sense that our players, we've got a group of players that, all of a sudden are kind of 21 to 25, who could very, very quickly become our best players if they're not already. So that gives us hope. But just take a casual glance around the competition. They're everywhere. Yeah. They're everywhere, those lists. So if we rely on talent, or we convince ourselves that we've got this magic dust that we spray over everyone and turn them into, great players and great people. I think we're setting ourselves up for a fall. So stay real, understand how hard it is, and it will get hard. So when we have those, and this is one of the things I love about our people across the whole Cats community, when we do stumble, and we will stumble, I reckon they stick by us because they back in that we'll keep our heads and we'll keep having a crack. And there may come a time where we have to sit in front of you and say, look, the next couple of years is going to be tough and we really need you to stick by us, but I think we can guarantee that we're going to give you an enjoyable ride. It might be wild and it might be up and down, but we're going to have a crack.
Thanks, Coach. I'll wrap up quickly from a player's perspective. We are incredibly fortunate to have Chris at the helm, as well as Steve and Craig. And to Craig, thank you for everything that you've contributed to our football club. You've been a wonderful leader for us. We've been very fortunate, mate. To all our supporters, enjoy the night. There's some really worthy winners coming up. You want to talk about Craig? Yeah,
I do. Sorry, I couldn't leave without spending a little bit of time on Craig Drummond.
Yeah.
So and I'm going to talk about Craig in isolation, but also the leadership of Colin Carter before Craig. They've been an inspiration to me, and I try to get away from footy a little bit, and sort of the business world is of great interest to me, and sometimes when we're sort of encapsulated in our footy world, you forget I guess the gravitas that people like Colin and Craig have in the business community, but it doesn't always translate into footy. But with them, it absolutely did. I've never felt. I can't imagine, and I do have friends who work out there in the competition, and they. When they sort of talk about, jealous is not the right word, but what they admire about the Geelong Footy Club, it's remarkable how often, and this only comes from people in the know, they bring up the support that we have from above. They're not interventionalists, they're not, with the greatest of respect to both of them, they don't purport to be brilliant tacticians, they don't pick the team, but wow, they have our back. And the club's in such good shape on and off the field because of their leadership. Now, Craig could stay for another 10 years if he wanted to, but he feels so strongly in the model that he's sort of espoused in the past that he's going, I think, in my opinion, before his time's up. And that will make it so much better for Grant McCabe to come in and lead in his way. On a personal note, Craig and Bernadette, thanks very much for your support. Sarah and I appreciate it greatly.
Thanks, Scotty. And just finally to all the supporters here, as a playing group, one thing that I can guarantee is that we'll get back to work once the pre-season resumes with a real hunger to go one better. We know the expectations you have, and they're certainly matched by ours internally. So thank you for all of your support. To the players' partners tonight as well, they do an incredible job supporting our players, the staff. There's big hours at times, and they are incredible, particularly Sarah Scott, who has to put up with Chris. She is a superwoman, but we do genuinely really appreciate it. And to our staff that have put on tonight, that often it is a thankless task. Events like this and many others right throughout the year. You guys do such a fabulous job. You go well above and beyond. What a normal job is, it's certainly not a 9 to 5. There's weekends, there's Sundays, there's everything in between. So to all our CAT staff, you guys are the best and you do a huge amount for us and we really appreciate it. Thank you.